This is our first time playing chess on a
Yeah, on the
regular
board.
board.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, so there ain't no definitely ain't no open spots like it's showing us where a piece could possibly go anymore.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so
always hated that. I
it
don't think that's not the right way to learn. You got to learn by making the mistake, make that wrong move,
yeah.
and then you go from there.
I mean, but that's what we had because we were apart.
Yeah,
Like
no,
we was in different locations.
absolutely.
Like
I appreciate it at the end of the day.
yeah, like it was like training wheels.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
See, my mindset is always like, rip the training wheels off. Let's break something, bones, uh, mentalities, whatever the case may be. Let's break it.
Yeah, I get
We'll
it.
figure it out later.
I get it, but yeah, I mean, imagine if you were actually riding a bike without learning how to ride a bike without training wheels.
When I have children of my own, that will be exactly how they operate.
Without teaching them without training wheels.
Well, initially, but the time period with training will that'll be a short window, right? You'll control the environment in terms of, you know, making it easier for falls and such. Like when you do fall, you be able to. It won't be necessarily concrete initially, but um, let's learn in tiers. Let's expedite the learning process. We don't want to have those training wheels on too long. You got to move.
Mm. Right. So speaking of, so like when you were progressing to Silicon Valley, what on a scale of 1 through 10, what would you say the training wheels were on a scale of 1 through 10 when you were like starting off in DC and making that progression to eventually where you are at Silicon Valley?
Uh, yeah. So my first tech job was in DC. I worked for a company called New Signature. It was like a startup, like a cloud computing company. Um, they were kind of beginning some of the early specialization in the cloud, so Azure specifically. But when I started at the organization, it was a very much so take the training wheels off. Like I came in and immediately I'm interacting with clients. Immediately, I'm having to just go right. Here's your documentation. If you got any questions, ask them. Otherwise, go right. So that's kind of how I was ushered into tech, and as I've transitioned and I've grown, uh, Silicon Valley, I think, very much so has that mentality as well. Whereas to the expectation is that you go, and within that region, it's a very collaborative environment. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. Right, ask the smallest or the biggest questions because at the end of the day, you're solving some of the most complex problems. So you'll have to ask questions at all levels, big and small.
Okay, so like, what were the challenges for you? Like, okay, when the training wheels were taken off for you when you were first transitioning, because moving to Cali from DC, that ain't no small relocation. I mean, I
Yeah,
moved from Maryland to Georgia, but the flight is only like 2 hours. Like moving from DC to Cali,
yeah. Um, it had a lot of challenges, right? For one, you're uprooting yourself and you're leaving your family, right? Um, that's the biggest one, right? You have to deal with thinking about missing birthdays, right? There's little ones where it's you'll see them one year, they're crawling, the next year they're walking, right? Niece, cousins, and all the smaller people. So there's that challenge as well as your parents seeing them age and you maybe not being there to um, be a physical support in certain aspects, as well as just culturally. California culture is different. Having to make an adjustment to that and pivoting into a new cultural environment, that has its challenges. But you know, as humans, we have the ability to be very resilient and to figure things out along the way. So these things tend to solve themselves themselves. Like nature has this way of helping you to chart your path in these sort of instances.
And then Silicon Valley is like, man, I've heard of Silicon Valley, but if someone to ask me what it was, I wouldn't be able to explain it.
Yeah, so um, Silicon Valley itself is kind of the epicenter of a lot of the technological advancement that we have in the country and around the world, right? You have some of the most intelligent people, as well as some of the best universities in the country, in the world, and they're all in one geography, which explains why a lot of the innovation that we see comes out of the space. Um, so it's been quite the experience to um, having journeyed to that space. It's transformed my way of thinking in many different ways. Um, I don't think I'll ever be the same again, in certain aspects, just based off of the things that I've learned. Um, it'll never be the same.
Like what? Like what are some of the things that you've learned that you didn't know before about Silicon Valley or tech or anything?
Yeah, so one of the more popular Silicon Valley names is Steve Jobs, right? And Steve Jobs is the greatest designer, maybe of in the history of the world, possibly, right?
Even beyond Bill Gates, or
Um,
are they on the same tier?
I think comparison kills joy, but um, this
Not
is
really trying to compare, but just the you said the greatest.
yeah, it's debatable, right? It's for anyone's perspective, right? In terms of how I absorb things, I would say Steve Jobs. Just from a design perspective, not only his the visionary piece of his design mind, but also just the tenacity, right? I'm sure at all points in time, there's people who thought the Macintosh wasn't something that the world would absorb, or the Lisa, or the iPad, the iPhone. These are probably things that at all stops people thought weren't going to have the global impact that they have had. And Steve Jobs had a certain tenacity about him in his design mind. As far as I know, he wasn't a coder, right? He wasn't a programmer. That was more so Steve Wozniak and those teams. But Silicon Valley has transformed me in terms of just looking at things from a design perspective, right? I didn't necessarily grow up with the most abstract way of thinking, but being in that region, I'm thinking in a way more abstract format, right? I'm painting in all things now. I'm drawing in all formats of life. It's not as linear as I thought previously. We're in an abstract world now, and I'm happy to be using that part of my brain at this point in my life.
That's what's up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, how do you feel about people trying to get involved in the tech world for whatever reason? A lot of reasons I would say is for the money because they say it pays well.
Yeah, understandable, right? We're in an economy where things are relatively expensive, and all things are kind of trending to have an underpinning of tech being involved in it, regardless of the industry. But in terms of people wanting to get into the industry, I think that's a beautiful thing. At the same time, if you want to be able to sustain in the industry, you probably want to have some love for whatever you're pursuing, right? I think that's the case in all pillars of life. In order to sustain in any industry, you have to wake up to kind of want to be a part of such. You gotta want to. You have to want to consume information about where things are going and staying ahead of the curve. So, um, love is always at the center of things, even in technology, and that extends to all pillars of life.
Okay, so is that what you would like suggest to people to if they, anybody that wants to get involved with tech? Is that what you would suggest, or is there any other things you would suggest to people that may be interested in getting into tech?
Um, what I would suggest in terms of how to go about the pursuit.
Yeah, pursue if they're interested, why they should be interested,
Um,
what to expect, what to prepare for, things to know.
yeah, I mean, in terms of the pursuit, I would encourage anyone uh, to pursue it. Right, I have a saying: skills pay the bills. Right, so uh, when we use tech as a terminology, it's like an umbrella term. There's so many things that fall under tech. Um, so pick whichever facet most interests you and find the skill that's most in demand for that particular subset of tech, right? You find that skill. You may want to venture into cybersecurity, right? But there's different functions in cybersecurity, right? You have incident response, vulnerability management, penetration testing, right? And then under that umbrella are the skills that are required for each of those things. So you find those skills. Do I need to learn Python? Um, do I need to learn AWS? These are like cloud computing
Right.
platforms. Do I need to learn AWS? Do I need to learn Azure? Right. So treat it in a very umbrella format. Right. You harness your umbrella and catch the things that trickle under it, and approach it that way. It's not so much we want to stay away from, or at least everyone can approach it however they choose, but we want to have a mindset of having a very strong focus to be able to create the path of however you go about your journey.
All right. Don't like with you being in. How long has it been you've been in Cali now? For like a couple years.
19 months.
19 months. He counted about a month. I'm like, how old is the baby? 2 years? Nah, 19 months. Baby, 19 months. So
19 months.
yeah. Well, like I felt this experience of like being away from damn near everybody that I grew up with, whether it was in Nigeria or whether it was in Maryland. Being in Georgia has made me realize how important it is to have family around.
Right.
You feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Moving away from home, it heightens that understanding of the power of family, and being absent of such, it weighs on the heart. Like to just to be honest, right? To be clear, concise about things. Um, because when we have proximity to one another, we tend to not value one another as much. But in absence, it's been times me living in Cali when my parents call, that'll make my day so much better. Just hearing their voices and hearing their wisdom, it changes the trajectory of my day. And you would never thought you would see today. I remember in my early 20s, my parents would call. I'm in college. We're at Morgan, and I'm annoyed. Like, man, why they calling me, man? I'm turned. Like, this is crazy. Like, why are you calling me? Like, I don't. But now at 30 years old, 32 years old, they call, and it's almost like a spiritual thing in a sense. Like, whichever peaks or lows that you're going through, they create an immediate equilibrium around whatever you have going on. Right? My mom calls me, and how's it going, son? And my dad, love you, son. Just hearing those things, although they may seem minuscule, they're the biggest things that exist in life.
Yeah, man. Like going when I went to Nigeria for the first time in 7 years in December, that made it way more clear to me because not only was I in Nigeria with my family in Nigeria, it was the first time I was around my family, my immediate family, like my mom and siblings here in America. So by the time I by the time the trip was over and I came back to America, I only had like a couple more hours with my immediate family provided to get on the flight back to Georgia. So in a matter of like 24 hours, or let's say like 48 hours, boom, I'm just away from everybody that I grew up with. Not to say that I don't appreciate the connections that I made in Georgia, but man, to go from surrounded by all this family and then boom to go back to being away from them for a long time, that hit different, man.
Yeah,
That really made me appreciate family and just the Nigerian culture.
right, right.
So I mean, I know for you, you were saying it was like a long time since you had visited Nigeria. How long has it been?
It have been like 22, 23 years since I have went home. So it's been quite a while.
So what was that? So what was it like uh, during the time that you were yearning to go back? Visit again. What was it like yearning to go back? Planning, anticipating. What were you looking forward to going to
Um,
Nigeria?
it was I was chomping at the bit, man. Like, initially I was supposed to go with my parents, and there was some challenges in terms of coordinating things. So I had to go the following year that we had initially planned. So it kind of hurt my heart because I wanted to go with my parents, but I ended up going with my cousin, and it was quite the spiritual journey. It's not just traveling and hearing Afro beats and I'm happy, right? It goes much beyond that. Like, this is the birthplace of my lineage, my culture. A lot of roots were layered there. So it was quite frankly a spiritual experience. Even when I landed on the plane, it was like a metaphysical experience at that point. I'm like, yo, I'm really in Nigeria. Like, I'm really here. It didn't even make sense to me. And
The air is different.
the air is different. It's
Very
beautiful.
different.
It's beautiful. Just landing in Lagos. Even the flight, just being around our
Hold
people.
on, excuse me. You say you wanted another drink, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna do another glass.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Um, yeah, it was man. I didn't quite anticipate it being in that the experience being that way. Um, even the time leading up to it, like, I'm not like an anxious person, but like I had a lot of anxiety, for lack of better terms, about it because I just didn't know what to expect. It had been so long, but once the flight landed, I knew what my purpose was to be there.
Yeah. So, okay, so what was your experience like? How long were you there?
I was there 8 days.
8 days. Okay, so what were you able to do in 8 days there?
So I was able to visit both of my parents' states.
What
Uh,
states?
so my mom is from Owo, so I believe Ondo State. My dad is from Ikere, so Ekiti State.
Okay.
So being able to venture to both of those states, as well as my parents have a house in Akure, so being able to go to both of those places and visit and feel the energy of my ancestors and see some of the beautiful things that my family is doing there, still supporting the community. My family, they have a hotel in Ikere, and
Hold up. They have a hotel. They have their own hotel.
they have a hotel.
What's the name of this hotel?
Oh man, I'm blanking on the name, but I'll remember it here shortly. But there's a family hotel there, and so anytime we go home, we have the opportunity to stay there, as well as the hotel employs a lot of people in the town. There's a lot of people in the area who work there and are able to build a life for their own family based on working on the hotel. One of my late uncles is the one who's the architect of the hotel in terms of building it, leaving it to his sons to be able to sustain and continue life, um, not only for the family but for the people of the state as well.
What's that? So it's like the money that they're making from the hotel, the currency is naira. I know when I was there, I was reminded, even I learned more to some extent, like how much different the value of a dollar is versus the value of naira. Like, shoot, if I'm not mistaken, right now $1 is over a little over 1,600 naira. So you can do a lot with 1,600 naira in Nigeria. So like, how much like when you said it was over like 20 years since you've been there. So what do you think about like the currency ratio, as in like how much money you could spend over there in Nigeria despite not having to do what they do there? Like, you make the money here, spend it in Nigeria, but you don't have to spend as much money there as you would spend here for the same kind of things. What was that like?
I mean, that was interesting. I went to Lakey and I liked it. It was beautiful, and I started looking at the price of houses there, and I'm like, oh man, I can get a house in Lakey for 90,000 naira. I'm like, man, I want to buy a
Convert that
house
to
there.
dollars. Let's convert that to dollars. 90,000 naira.
Yeah, I want to say maybe $50,000 or so. I don't know what the current exchange rate is, but maybe
Oh,
somewhere in that range.
keep this in mind. You said $90,000. The current rate is a little bit over $1,600. 1,600 is 1,600. So $56. If you have $56, you have 90,000 naira. Let that sink in. You can make $56 in 30 minutes with your job.
Right, right.
So
Yeah. So
you can live like a straight up king
that's
out
the
there.
that's the plan. Yeah, it opened my mind. Like, man, I want a space at home where I can just go and have that solitude. So I like Lakey. So that may be in the cards here in the near term.